So, this is it, my very first video. I couldn't have picked a stranger story to start with. It's one of those cases that keeps circling back, every answer just leads to another question. Nothing fits, nothing ever did. If you love stories that slip between the cracks of the ordinary, where the tragic meets the inexplicable and the truth lingers like a ghost, you're in the right place. Welcome to Dolorous Melancholia.
She drinks her tea with spider legs, her corset laced with gossamer thread. Dolorous hums in candlelight while spinning tales to raise the dead.
Today, we're going back to 1978 to the rural towns of Yuba City and Marysville, California. Close-knit working-class communities where everyone knew each other. The kind of place where you didn't just vanish. But one cold February night, 5 young men left a college basketball game and vanished into the Sierra Nevada mountains. No crash, no clear reason. And when their car was found days later, abandoned on a remote logging road, nothing about it made sense. No damage, no sign of panic, just an empty car deep in the woods and no one around. Over the years, people have blamed everything from hypothermia to foul play to even stranger things. But one quiet detail buried deep in the case files changed the way I see this story and made me start asking a different kind of question altogether. To really understand this case, you have to understand them and who these 5 men really were, because that's the part that so often gets lost in all the theories. 4 of the 5, Ted Weiher, Jackie Huett, Bill Sterling, and Jack Madruga, had mild developmental or intellectual disabilities. Only Gary Mathias, the newest among them, had a diagnosed mental illness, schizophrenia. But none of that defined them. They were all high-functioning and independent. Together, they were part of Gateway Projects, a day program in Yuba City for adults with disabilities. That's where they met and where their bond really formed. Pay attention to their small quirks because I feel they're relevant later. So, people around town called them simply the boys. You'd see them walking home after practice, piling into Jack's Mercury, grabbing snacks from the corner store. They weren't loud, reckless, or wild. Just 5 guys who stuck together. The group sort of started with Ted Weiher and Jackie Huett. Ted was 32, tall, broad, with a soft, slow way of speaking that instantly put people at ease. He had a gentle caretaker energy. Ted's mother said he wasn't someone who handled stress very well, and in a dangerous situation, he'd probably just run and hide. What really stuck out to me about Ted, though, was his loyalty. He and Jackie had been inseparable since the early 70s. Jackie was 8 years younger, but Ted took him under his wing. Jackie had trouble dialing phones, but no worries. Ted would reach over and dial for him. If Ted was going somewhere, Jackie was going too. They were a package deal. Jackie Huett was the youngest of the group at 24. He was trusting by nature and very shy in new situations and tended to hang back until he felt completely safe. Though many reports would later call him the most impaired of the group, his family pushed back on that and said Jackie was capable in his own way and could thrive when surrounded by familiarity. He couldn't read or write, and he'd never spent a night away from home. He sometimes struggled to express himself, but he communicated plenty through his enthusiasm, his laugh, and the way his face lit up when he felt included. Bill Sterling was 29, soft-spoken, spiritual, and widely known as the heart of the group. He had this quiet kindness about him. He'd visit hospitals just to read Bible verses to patients he didn't know, or call someone out of the blue just because he thought a line of scripture might lift their spirits. Now, the most I can find on record for his disability was a history of being institutionalized for hyperactivity. Mental health support certainly was different in the 70s. His mother said he could easily walk 9 or 10 miles quickly without hesitation. She also said that Bill enjoyed his routine and liked to get to bed early. Jack Madruga, or Doc as the guys like to call him, was 30 years old, quiet and reserved. He got his nickname because of his spot-on Bugs Bunny impressions. He was a shy loner in many ways, but those who knew him well described him as intelligent, kind, and quietly funny. He never drank or smoked and didn't like crowds. His mother described him as cautious, almost to a fault. Someone who wouldn't go anywhere unfamiliar unless he absolutely had to. He was also the only one in the group with a driver's license, and his '69 Mercury Montego was his pride and joy. No one else was ever allowed to drive it. He babied that car so much that he would make friends with long gravel driveways meet him at the road. You'll notice a common theme with the boys is that they thrived in structured environments and stuck to their routines. Jack's was work, church, basketball practice, and his favorite show, I Love Lucy. The last member to join the boys was Gary Mathias. He was 25, confident, and funny. He had that rare blend of athleticism and creativity where he was just as comfortable tossing a basketball as he was playing the harmonica. He loved the Rolling Stones and Olivia Newton-John. Like Jack, Gary served in the army and was stationed in Germany, but his return home hadn't been easy. He'd been diagnosed with schizophrenia and had gone through a really rough stretch in the years that followed his service. He even had some hospitalizations and arrests. But by 1978, Gary was in a good place. He was receiving treatment and was on a stable medication plan. Together, the 5 of them, Ted, Jackie, Bill, Jack, and Gary, just made sense. And that's what makes what happened next so strange, because that Friday, it started out like any other, just 5 friends getting ready for the big game. It's Friday, February 24th, 1978, the day before the big game. And this wasn't just any game. The Gateway Gators had been training for months for this one. It was a tournament hosted by the Special Olympics, and the winners? They'd get an all-expenses-paid trip to LA for the finals. This was all the guys could talk about. Their families joked that they were driving everyone crazy. Uniforms laid out, gear packed, alarms double-checked. They were ready. Their parents would later say the boys would have walked through fire to make that game. At the Weiher house, Ted was in great spirits. He tried on his brand new high-top sneakers, scuffed them a little, then begged his mom to clean them back to sparkling white. He wanted to look sharp for the game. Over at the Huett house, Jackie was just as excited. His mom said he asked her 3 separate times what time Ted would be picking him up in the morning. He'd even ironed his uniform and laid it neatly on the dresser. All week long, that's all he talked about, the big game. At the Sterling house, Bill had his Gateway sweater freshly washed and draped over his chair. He was quiet but smiling. Before he left that night, he reminded his mom again not to forget to wake him early for the big game. Over at the Madruga house, Jack was in a great mood too. He'd recently been laid off from his job, but it didn't dampen his spirits. That morning, he cleaned out his car, his prized '69 Mercury Montego, wiping down the dash, making sure it was spotless. He told his mom he'd go to the unemployment office that morning, then hang out at Bill's before heading to the game that night. he left home at 9 a.m. And finally, at the Mathias home, Gary was excited and ready to go. His stepfather Robert said he even shaved his beard that morning to look fresh. Gary talked about how proud he was of the team, how good it felt to finally be in such a stable, happy place. Before heading out, he told his mom not to let him oversleep tomorrow because he's got the big game. Normally, the boys would have had a quiet night in before such a big day, but this night was different. Their favorite team, the UC Davis Aggies, were playing the Chico State Wildcats. It was the last Aggies game close enough to see in person. They had to go. Around 6 p.m., Jack drives over to the Sterling house. They hang out for a bit, then stop by Bill's family's gas station on Colusa Highway. They top off the Montego with $3 of gas, say a quick goodbye to Mrs. Sterling, and next, they swing by the Weiher house to pick up Ted and Gary. Ted's grandmother called after him to bring a coat, but Ted said he wouldn't need one that night. Their final stop is Jackie Huett's house around 6:30. Jackie climbs in, and that made 5. So, the guys head out of Yuba City around 6 p.m. 5 friends, excited, joking around, just doing their usual thing. They'd done this drive plenty of times before. Their parents weren't worried. They always called if they were running late, always came home when they said they would. This was just another Friday night out with the boys. They pulled into Chico a little after 7 and made their way to the Art Acker Gymnasium. You can almost picture it. The smell of popcorn, the buzz of the crowd, sneakers squeaking on the court. Tip-off was set for 7:45, and sure enough, witnesses remember seeing them there, cheering, laughing, clapping, totally wrapped up in the game. Their team won 98-86, and everyone said the 5 of them were in great spirits. After the game, they stopped for snacks at Bears Market before heading home. The clerk, Mary Davis, remembered them clearly. She said they seemed cheerful. They joked with her, paid for their snacks, and headed back out to their car. That moment, walking out of Bears Market, is the last confirmed time anyone ever saw them alive. They pulled out of the lot, headed south out of Chico, the same road they always took home toward Yuba City. They were expected home before midnight, but somewhere along the way, something went very wrong. Back home, everything was quiet. The lights went out, the town settled in. Everyone expected to wake up to a normal Saturday, game day for the boys. But by dawn, something felt wrong. Around 5 a.m., Imogene Weiher, Ted's mom, jolted awake with a sudden wave of unease. No crash, no phone call, just that heavy, anxious stillness. She walked down the hall to check Ted's room, and his bed was empty. Worried, she picked up the phone and called Juanita Sterling, Bill's mom. Juanita was already awake. She'd been pacing since 2 a.m., waiting for the sound of the front door that never came. She told Imogene she'd already checked with Jack Madruga's mom, hoping maybe the boys had crashed there for the night, but no, Jack was missing too. Imogene then calls Sarah Huett, Jackie's mom, while another family member heads over to the Mathias house to speak with Gary's stepfather, Robert. By sunrise, it was clear. All 5 of them were gone. And that was terrifying, because these weren't reckless kids. They were routine guys. Some of them were afraid of the dark. None of them would have stayed out all night without calling home. The hours dragged. Morning turned into afternoon. Afternoon into evening. Mrs. Madruga calls Gateway Projects, but the staff tells her the boys never showed up for their game. That's when the panic really set in, because everyone knew those boys would have walked through fire to make that game. By 8 p.m. Saturday night, Mrs. Madruga finally calls the Sutter County Sheriff's Office to report all 5 men missing. By the next morning, Saturday, February 25th, search efforts were already underway. Agencies in Yuba and Butte counties teamed up fast, starting with the obvious route between Chico and Yuba City. Maybe the car had broken down somewhere along the way. Officers pulled every police and radio log from the night before, looking for reports of stranded vehicles or anything unusual, but nothing. They contacted local newspapers, hoping someone had snapped photos at the game. Maybe the boys were in the crowd. Maybe someone suspicious was sitting nearby. Investigators retraced their last known steps, checking every gas station and convenience store between Chico and Yuba City. That's when they found Mary Davis, the clerk from Bears Market, the last confirmed person to see the boys alive. She told police they came in laughing, happy, just being themselves. No signs of trouble, no one following them. Detectives sat down with family and friends, trying to understand who were these young men. What would they have done if the car broke down? Where might they go? They even pulled the parents' phone toll records, looking for overlap, any strange numbers, any connection they might have missed. But nothing turned up. Every lead fizzled. No sightings, no witnesses, no evidence. It was as if the Yuba County Five had simply vanished. It's Tuesday, February 28th, 4 days since the boys vanished. A forest ranger in Plumas National Forest radios in and says, "Hey, I think I saw that car you're looking for." A few days earlier, on Saturday, he'd noticed a turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego parked all the way up on the Oroville-Quincy Road, middle of nowhere. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but when he saw the missing persons bulletin, everything clicked. He leads deputies back out there and, sure enough, there it was. Jack Madruga's Montego, just sitting there in the snow. Not crashed, not stuck, not in a ditch. Just sitting there. The front tires were lightly sunk, but nothing serious. Investigators said 5 grown men could have pushed it out in seconds. The keys were gone, but the doors were unlocked. When deputies tested it, the engine started right up and it still had a quarter tank of gas. There was no damage, no mud under the frame, meaning whoever drove it had been careful, easing over rocks and ruts, not flooring it. Even the battery and tires were fine. The driver's side window was rolled down, which was strange because it was freezing that night. Inside the car, they found fast food wrappers from Bears Market, programs from the UC Davis game, a folded California road map on the seat. At first, detectives thought the map might be a clue, but when they showed it to Mrs. Sterling, she recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Bill's. He loved maps and would mark down all the boys' usual hangouts. There was no blood, no sign of struggle, no forced entry, no damage, just an unlocked car in the middle of a mountain, perfectly fine and completely abandoned. And here's what threw everyone for a loop. The car wasn't anywhere near home. It was 70 miles off course and in the complete opposite direction. If you pull up a map, it makes zero sense. I'll put one on the screen for you to see for yourselves. Leaving Chico, it was pretty much a straight shot to home. No complicated exits, no overpasses, no reason to wind up that far out. To end up on that road, they would have had to drive deep into the Sierra foothills, up a twisted, icy logging route that even locals avoided in daylight, let alone winter at night. This wasn't a wrong turn. This was mountain country, dirt roads, sharp switchbacks, snowbanks towering on both sides. None of the boys hunted, none camped, and they weren't dressed for the cold. They were supposed to be home, laying out their uniforms, getting ready for their game the next morning. But instead, their car was sitting alone, miles into the wilderness, perfectly fine and eerily out of place, as if someone or something led them there on purpose. Once word got out about the Montego, the phone lines blew up. Sightings started pouring in, people swearing they'd seen the car that weekend. One of those calls came from a local man named Bill Neal. He'd been out cross-country skiing on Saturday morning, February 25th, around 10 a.m., driving up towards a spot called Mountain House. And there it was, a turquoise and white Mercury Montego, parked dead center in the road. Bill said it didn't look stock, just parked there, like someone had pulled over on purpose. But then he noticed something else. Farther up the road, maybe 40 or 50 feet away, a Volkswagen. When Bill came back later that afternoon, the VW had been moved. It was now parked closer to the Montego. He didn't think much of it at the time until a few days later, when he saw the missing persons bulletin, and suddenly it all clicked. Police tracked down the Volkswagen's owner, and that's when this story starts to bend a bit sideways, because it wasn't just some random hiker or camper. The car belonged to a man named Joseph Schons, and what he claimed happened that night changed everything. It's Friday, February 24th, the exact night the boys disappear. Joe tells police he drove up the mountain to check the snow level before taking his family skiing the next day. So, picture this. It's midnight. The wind's howling. He's in a little Volkswagen Beetle, winding through icy mountain roads when, suddenly, the car hits a snowbank and gets stuck. He tries rocking it, spinning the tires, nothing. So, he gets out to push, and just like that, a crushing pain grips his chest. He drops to his knees. Heart attack. Somehow he drags himself back into the car and slips in and out of consciousness for hours. Then, around 11:30 p.m., he's jolted awake by headlights. 2 vehicles, a car and a red pickup truck. They pull up about 20 feet away. He can see shapes, a small group of people standing outside, a few men and a woman holding a baby. Joe starts yelling, begging for help. No response. A few minutes later, he sees flashlights moving through the trees, getting closer. He calls out again, and the flashlights instantly click off. And that's it. They're gone. He's freezing, in pain, alone in the mountains. He keeps the engine running for warmth until the gas runs out around 2 a.m. After that, it's just cold and silence. By 4 a.m., he forces himself out of the car and starts walking. Weak, disoriented, that's when he passes the blue and white car sitting in the snow. He tries the door. It's unlocked. The dome light flicks on. Inside, just candy wrappers, soda cans, and trash. No people. He keeps walking. By 10 a.m., he finally makes it to the mountain house where a couple gives him a ride home. When people in town heard Joe's story, a few details didn't sit right. For starters, his family didn't ski. Not even a little. And he and his wife couldn't stand to be in the same room as each other. So, the idea of a wholesome family ski trip already felt off. Even Joe's daughter later called the whole thing ludicrous. They never did outings like that. And while the couple who gave him a ride home said he looked tired, they told police he never once mentioned a heart attack. Still, when his wife took him to the hospital later, doctors did confirm he had suffered one. They just couldn't say when. Then there's his car. Joe said he kept it running all night for heat, but older Volkswagen Beetles didn't blow warm air unless the engine was revving. So, if he really sat there all night staying warm, he'd still have been freezing. And this is where the first real theory starts to take shape. Because once Joe's story got around, the heart attack, the headlights, the woman with the baby, people started connecting dots that might not have even been there. Joe wasn't exactly a stranger to police. He, his wife, and his son all had records. Burglary, drugs, even a kidnapping charge. He was the kind of person who told lies like they were memories. There were rumors, pot plants in the woods, gunfire echoing off the ridge, and yet, somehow, he never got caught. So, when folks found out he'd been on the same mountain the night the boys went missing, they started talking. Some thought maybe he'd been involved. Others believed the boys might have stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to see. Maybe something connected to Joe or the people around him. To be fair, not everyone thinks Joe is lying. Most of the family and officers believe that a good chunk of his story might hold up and that maybe he really did see headlights and really did have a heart attack. He just remembered it imperfectly. The voices, the flashlights, the woman with the baby, no one's ever been able to verify any of it. But one detail from Joe's story has never faded: a red pickup truck. It pops up again later in small, unsettling ways. Not enough to prove anything, but enough to make you wonder. Now that we've got the Joe theory out of the way, let's talk about another theory that just won't die: the wrong turn. You've heard it before. They must have just gotten lost. It sounds neat, simple, but here's the thing. These guys weren't lost puppies. They were smart, responsible, and creatures of habit. 2 of them were military vets. Jack drove trucks for top officials, paid bills, fixed his own car. Gary was street smart, trained, and sharp. And Bill Sterling, he literally collected maps for fun. If anyone could read a road, it was Bill. So, how does a group like that accidentally end up 70 miles away in the opposite direction of home? In 1978, the drive from Chico to Yuba City was simple. One clean line down Highway 99. No tricky exits, no winding back roads, just home. I'll pull up the map here again so you could see just how crazy this would be. To get where their car was found, they'd have to take multiple intentional wrong turns, then drive all the way through the entire town of Oroville. We're talking gas stations, diners, neon lights, and somehow not think, wait, this looks new? Then cross not 1 but 2 bridges, including the massive Bidwell Bar Bridge. And trust me, you don't just miss that. From there, the road climbs, dark forest, sharp turns, ice on the ground. You're not in oops, I missed an exit territory anymore. You're in what the hell are we doing up here territory. Locals said it then, and they still say it now. Nobody ends up on the Oroville-Quincy Highway by accident. It's steep, narrow, pitch black at night. You feel it in your gut the second the road changes. And past the mountain house, it wasn't even fully paved in 78. Just ruts, ice, drop-offs, a road designed to ruin your night. And you know who hated roads like that? Jack Madruga. Before, Jack wouldn't even drive down a friend's gravel driveway. He'd make them walk up to the road again. So, how did his beloved Mercury Montego, low-riding, heavy, and packed with 5 grown men, make it miles up that mountain road, without so much as a dent or scratch underneath? Some locals say it didn't, that maybe it was guided there or towed. Whatever happened, one thing's for sure. This wasn't a simple wrong turn. Something or someone took them up that mountain. And if it wasn't a mistake, maybe it was a plan. But a plan by who? For weeks they searched, police, families, volunteers, combing the back roads, helicopters scanning from above. But no footprints, no jackets caught on a branch, just that car sitting in the snow like it had been dropped from the sky. Winter dragged on, and slowly so did hope. Then came June. The snow started to melt and the truth started to surface. It's June 4th, 1978. A group of motorcyclists are riding through Plumas National Forest. Just another quiet summer day, when something hits them. A smell. Something awful. And here's the thing. People say that smell, you don't mistake it. Even if it's the first time, your brain still knows what it is. 16-year-old Roger Koch follows it, weaving through the trees. That's when he spots it, an old Forest Service trailer. Window shattered, something's inside. He steps closer, leans in, and freezes. On the lower bunk, wrapped in a sheets up to his neck, is the body of a man. Roger and the others don't wait. They jump on their bikes, fly down the mountain, and finally stop at Denny's to call the sheriff. It's 9:45 p.m. At first, deputies don't believe them. The location didn't make any sense. The trailer was more than 16 miles from where the boys' car had been abandoned, and the terrain between them was steep, rugged, and wild. It wasn't a trail or a road, just forest. One deputy later said he needed a compass just to find his way out, and that it would have taken the boys at least a full day and night to make the trip on foot, in sneakers, in the dark, through a blizzard, maybe even longer. Another deputy said if you didn't already know where the trailer was, it would be 1 in 1,000 to find that kind of place. So, when the officers heard there was a body that far out, they didn't buy it, not at first. But once they made the climb themselves, they found him. Ted Weiher. What they find next is haunting. Ted was wrapped in 8 sheets, tucked so tightly, it looked like someone had tried to make him comfortable, or laid him to rest. They were too tight for him to have done it himself. He was still wearing the same clothes from the night he disappeared, and his feet were so frostbitten that several toes were lost to gangrene. Next to him on a small table were his gold necklace, a ring engraved with Ted, his wallet, cash still inside, and a gold Waltham watch, its crystal missing. Here's the strange part. The families confirmed none of the boys owned a watch like that, and those watches, they weren't cheap. Not the kind you'd leave behind. In the 70s, a gold Waltham like that would have cost around $1,000. So, who did it belong to, and why was it left with Ted? The window had been broken, from the outside in, glass scattered across the floor, empty C-ration cans nearby, and yet, in a storage shed just steps away, a full year's worth of military rations, still sealed in boxes, dozens of them, untouched. Only 36 cans had been opened. Outside, the scene was just as unsettling. More cans near the broken window, books from the trailer tossed into the snow, a white sheet, a single sock, lying 30 feet from the door. Inside, just one candle had been burned. The propane tank and the coal stove were untouched. And only a few yards away, a second trailer stocked with everything they needed to survive. Fuel, blankets, winter clothing, a working generator, all of it left unused. As one lieutenant put it, all they had to do was turn the gas on and they'd have had heat. Nearby, searchers also found 3 wool blankets and a flashlight, half buried and rusty. Someone was trying to hold on, but they were doing it in the dark. 2 days later, on June 6th, the snow thawed further. Searchers followed what looked like a trail of blankets deeper into the Granite Basin area. That's when they found the others. Jack Madruga was first, lying face up by a narrow road, just 10 feet from a small stream. His right hand clutched his watch and, in his pocket, the keys to his Mercury Montego. Across the road they found Bill Sterling, or what was left of him. His bones were scattered across 50 square yards. His wallet, with ID still inside, lay nearby. Only 2 were left, Gary Mathias and Jackie Huett. 2 days later, they found one of them, and it's the part no one forgets. About a quarter mile from the trailer, Jackie's father, part of a volunteer search team, was combing the area. He lifted a jacket from the ground and a piece of bone fell out, a small section of his son's spine. The next day, they found a skull about 100 yards downhill. Dental records confirmed it was Jackie Huett. By now, the mountain was thawing fast, giving up its secrets one by one. But even after all that, one man was still missing, Gary Mathias. His shoes were found inside the trailer. Ted's boots were gone. So, most believe Gary had been there and left. A notepad sat nearby, short, uneven handwriting. Gary's sister believes it was his, which means Gary must have been up there at some point too. The autopsy report listed Ted's cause of death as exposure, hypothermia leading to pulmonary congestion. But there was no histology to check cell damage, no toxicology to rule out ingestion, no entomology to establish time of death, and no x-rays of the bones. Which means when they said there was no evidence of foul play, they said it without ever checking for fractures. The paperwork was changed later, not just for Ted, but for Jack, Bill, and Jackie too. Their death certificates originally read undetermined. Then, without announcement, without consultation, without any new testing, each one was amended to hypothermia, even for the men who were found as nothing but skeletal remains. And that matters because hypothermia isn't something you can diagnose from bones. It leaves no trace, no telltale signs in the skeleton. Once the tissue is gone, so's the evidence. So, how did they decide what killed them? No second opinion, no independent review. Even as forensic technology advanced, nothing was ever re-examined, even to this day. The only real attempt at a timeline came from Ted's beard length, his physical state, and his weight. He'd been close to 200 pounds when he disappeared. When they found him, he was 120. And from that, the coroner estimated he may have survived in that trailer for 8 to 13 weeks. Not hours, not days, weeks. Even if they were off by half, imagine that. All that time alone on the mountain. No heat, no light. He waited. As his body gave out and his toes blackened from frostbite, as he starved, waiting for help that never came. Then came the detail that no one could explain. Inside the trailer, there were 11 human finger bones. Ted wasn't missing fingers, only toes, which means at some point, at least 2 people were there, long enough to leave bones behind. But if they were in that condition, frostbitten, starving, How did they leave? Gary's shoes were still inside, but Gary? He was never found. Before Gary Mathias disappeared into one of California's strangest mysteries, his life had already been a storm. He graduated in '71, joined the Army, earned a sharpshooter medal, but not long after, the cracks started to show. Paranoia, hallucinations, blackouts. His superiors thought he was using drugs, and, to be fair, they weren't completely wrong. Like so many people with undiagnosed mental illness, Gary did self-medicate, which only made things worse. By 20, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and sent to a military hospital in San Francisco. When he came home, he just wasn't the same. For a while, his life spun out. He'd vanish for days, wander miles without remembering why. One time, he walked from Oregon to Yuba City, surviving off milk and pet food. There were arrests, trespassing fights, even an assault charge during a psychotic break. Many of the charges were dropped, but that didn't matter. Rumors don't care. They follow. You add in the stories, him breaking into houses searching for Satan's ring, and suddenly, the local gossip machine has its new villain. Some were scared of him, some pitied him, but all of them talked. And yet, through it all, Gary always came back home, to his mom, to his stepdad, and eventually to real help. Because here's what most people miss. As bad as those years were, that's not where his story ended. It's where it turned. By 1975, doctors found the right mix of meds, and for the first time in years, the noise in Gary's head quieted. The voices stopped, the fog lifted, he could breathe again. And he took it seriously. He didn't skip doses, he never, ever missed weekly treatment. He even took them with his stepdad like clockwork. People noticed. His mom, his doctors, his friends at Gateway. He was funny again, stable, even social. One doctor called him a sterling success case. This wasn't the Gary people whispered about in fear. This was the Gary who showed up, who showed growth, who found his rhythm again with the Gateway Gators. So, where did the violent, ticking time bomb version of Gary come from? Most of it traces back to one article, the Sacramento Bee. It painted Gary like a live grenade, unpredictable, dangerous, could flip at any time. And just like that, one headline hardened into legacy. That article leaned on two voices, his former basketball coach and his ex-brother-in-law. A man the town knew by another name, the town bully. Funny thing, both of those men had something in common. Fire. One survived it, the other might have started it. The first man, the coach, knew fire up close, because around the same time the Yuba County Five vanished, the Gateway projects, the place that connected all of them, was under siege. Gateway wasn't just a job site, it was a lifeline, and for months, someone had been trying to burn it to the ground. First, the workshop went up in flames, over $150,000 in damage. Then came a Molotov cocktail through the office window. Then bomb threats, anonymous phone calls, and finally, it turned deadly. Gateway's director, Donald Garrett, the coach's close friend, answered a knock at his front door. Whoever it was waiting. They doused him in gasoline and lit a match. Garrett died within minutes. Police ruled it a homicide. No one was ever charged. Then, the arsonist came for staff vehicles, including the coach's own car. The message couldn't have been clearer. This was personal, and law enforcement wasn't doing a damn thing about it. So, when the boys went missing, the coach didn't join the search. He didn't call the police. He didn't cry on camera. He just kept quiet. That silence got him labeled withdrawn, cold, and suspicious. Police said he was too nonchalant. Locals whispered maybe he knew something. He went from mentor to unofficial suspect. Part of that suspicion came from that Saturday morning. The boys were supposed to play in that Special Olympics tournament. He didn't show up. It looked bad. But what people didn't know? 2 of the mothers had already called him early that morning. They were panicked. The boys never came home, so by sunrise, he knew something was wrong too. He wasn't being cold. He was processing the same dread they were. I felt if you wanted to talk to me, you'd contact me. It's what he told a deputy, right there in the case file. That's when the officer called him nonchalant. But the coach had a reason. Months earlier, when his friend had been burned alive, when Gateway was firebombed, when his own car had been torched, no one from law enforcement ever came to ask him a single question. So, when the boys vanished and detectives finally came knocking, he figured it would be the same story all over again. Maybe he wasn't cold. Maybe he just didn't trust the people asking. Then came the Sacramento Bee. They quoted the coach calling Gary spacey, could flip out at any time. That one line, it spread like wildfire. Podcasts, documentaries, Reddit threads. But here's what nobody tells you. That coach wasn't just some guy with a clipboard. He was their rehabilitation counselor. He played ball with them every week, took them to community events, even organized a 3-day trip to Redondo Beach in '77. He booked the hotel, took them to dinner. That wasn't just a coach. He was their mentor. So, when police later claimed that he described Ted Weiher as aggressive, Bill Sterling as lazy, Jack Madruga as confrontational, and Gary Mathias as spacey, it made people flinch. But decades later, true crime author Drew Beeson tracked the coach down in Florida. And guess what? He denied ever saying any of it. He told Beeson, the police either twisted my words or completely made them up. When he talked about the boys, he called them highly functional, kind, close-knit, focused. Gary, he said, was competitive and steady, the opposite of spacey. And when Beeson asked if the boys could have just gotten lost, the coach didn't even blink. No, they'd have known the area looked nothing like home. They'd have turned around or stopped and asked for directions. So maybe the Bee didn't misquote him. Maybe they just recycled a bad police rumor. And here's the problem. The case files do include those quotes, right there in black and white. Whether those words came from the coach, a cop's summary, or someone twisting it down the line, we'll probably never know. Just like the case itself, the closer you look, the more it blurs. The most damaging voice in that Sacramento Bee article didn't come from law enforcement. It came from someone a lot closer to home. A man who claimed he knew Gary better than anyone. He called Gary a violent drug addict, a ticking time bomb, somebody bound to drag everyone down with him. And that quote? That's the one that stuck. It's what cemented the Gary did it theory that still floats around today. But here's what the Bee didn't tell you, and this part matters. That source? He wasn't a neighbor, he wasn't a friend. He was Gary's former brother-in-law, And in Yuba City, everyone knew him by another name, the town bully. He married Gary's sister Sharon when she was just 17. He was 21, and it was every kind of wrong. According to her sister Tammy, the relationship was brutal. He assaulted Sharon, he threatened their parents, he turned life into hell for the entire Mathias family. It wasn't just temper, it was terror. And when Sharon finally divorced him, just 2 months before the boys disappeared, he didn't move on. He escalated. He showed up uninvited, destroyed things, stalked the house. First, he torched Sharon's car, then her mother's. Fire was his calling card. One time, he screamed at Gary's mom, "Bitch, you'll see someday what it's like to have a dead son." After that, his attention shifted to Gary. Tammy said he beat him up, forced him to take drugs. Gary told his mom the guy wouldn't leave him alone. Even Jackie and Ted told the Huett family that the bully had been messing with their girlfriends. There's even a rumor he once locked Gary in a closet for days. No proof, but given everything else, I wouldn't be surprised. And then, after the threats, the fires, the fights, Gary vanishes. And here's where things turn ugly. Because while those gateway fires were tearing through the community, the ones that hit the workshop, the office, the cars, the ones that killed a man, Yuba City was whispering the same name. The same man who torched the Mathias family vehicles. The same man who screamed that Gary's mother would know what it's like to have a dead son. The same man who was never charged for any of it. And somehow, decades later, that was the guy the Sacramento Bee called for comment? That was their credible source? The voice the media trusted? Meanwhile, his own record? A rap sheet full of assaults, arsons, multiple sexual charges, even a disgusting case involving a bear trap and an assault of a woman. Then there was one bizarre headline involving a church confession, all public record, all ignored. By the early 1990s, the bully had reinvented himself as a born-again pastor.
And we need to realize that the Holy Spirit will lead us into all truth.
New look, same monster. According to Tammy Mathias, he hadn't changed. He'd just found a better stage. And that's when the whispers got darker, because buried deep in the Yuba County case files is a single note. It says that during a sermon, he told his congregation, and sorry, I'll have to censor a bit for YouTube, he said he was responsible for the deaths of 2 out of 7 Arsler males in the hills about 17 years earlier. 17 years earlier. That's almost exactly 1978. The report was marked as unverified, but when you line it up with the threats, the fires, the timeline, it stops sounding like a coincidence. And, apparently, that wasn't the only time. Another report says he once stood in front of his church and declared, "I killed a girl," while showing old prison photos. Was it guilt? Ego? A twisted performance? We'll never know. But it proves one thing. The violence, the fire, the fear. It didn't start with the Yuba County Five. It started long before. So when people ask where the fear started, not with the boys, not with Gary, but with a man the town already knew too well, and for some reason chose to listen to anyway.
Whispers on the back road, turning shadows into play.
I'll be honest, I debated whether to include this next part at all. Because it's not in the reports, it's not confirmed, and it definitely wouldn't hold up in court. But If you've spent time in the deep end of true crime, you already know the unofficial stuff has a way of lingering. It sticks in your head because whether it's true or not, it shows you what people believed was possible. So, treat what follows as what it is: rumors, whispers, small-town gossip, passed down over years, but sometimes that's where the truth starts to flicker through. Remember that red truck I mentioned earlier? Yeah, I wasn't exaggerating. It shows up a lot in this case. Not just in Joe Schons' account up in the mountains either. Other people said they saw it too. One woman said she saw the boys in the parking lot of Bear's Market. Some in the phone booth, and some, get this, sitting in a red pickup truck the night the boys disappeared. She wasn't the only one either. The story goes like this. The guys had just finished grabbing snacks. They're standing in the parking lot, maybe laughing, maybe a little rowdy. Just 5 friends winding down after a game. And then, a group of men started harassing Jackie Huett. Jackie was the youngest, sweet, trusting, non-confrontational. He wouldn't fight back. But Mathias, Gary would. He stepped in and a fight broke out. No cops, no report. But some people in town still say that fight didn't end there. Here's where it gets eerie. That red truck? It supposedly belonged to a man named Alan Martin, a close associate of the town bully. And many locals believe the bully was part of the fight that night. But that's not even the wildest part. A couple of months after the bodies were found, Alan Martin shows up at the Mathias family's house. He doesn't go to police, he goes to family. Said he had something to get off his chest. According to Gary's sister, Alan told them he'd been with the group that stopped the boys on the Oroville Dam Bridge that night. One of the men started slapping Jackie, just to hear the sound he made when he panicked. Gary snapped, tried to defend him, got jumped by the others. Then, Alan said, one of the men drove Jack's Montego with the boys inside, up into the mountain. Eventually, they were ordered out of the car and left in the freezing dark. 2 days after Alan told that story, he was dead. Heroin overdose. Except, everyone who knew him said he'd never used heroin. He preferred pills, didn't mess with needles. His girlfriend said a group of guys took him out of her house that night, and she never saw him alive again. And one of those guys, shortly after Alan Martin's suspicious death, that man suddenly moves to Arizona. And with Alan gone, the theories only grew. Some say Gary was killed on a bridge and thrown into the dam. Others say the fight spooked them all. They jumped into the Montego together and took off, trying to get away from whoever was following them. And then there's the theory that always haunted me, that the boys made it to the trailer but didn't light a fire because someone might see the glow, someone they were hiding from. Here's the only thing we know for sure. Gary's shoes were found in that trailer, and according to his sister, so were handwritten notes. It seems like Gary made it up that mountain. He fought to survive. Maybe he went for help, or maybe he tried and someone made sure he didn't. Now there's one last piece you need to hear before I move on to what really solidified my theory. And it's that years later, when this case was already cold, an interesting detail came out. There's something called the Brady List, a legal record of law enforcement officers who have a known history of dishonesty, evidence mishandling, or coercion. If an officer's on that list, it means the justice system itself considers their statements unreliable, and many of the officers involved in the investigation of the Yuba County Five, they would eventually end up on it. Yuba, Boot, Plumas. It doesn't prove a cover-up, but it does mean that the people we relied on to tell the truth were later legally documented as people who didn't always tell it. And once you know that, the missing files, the contradictions, the silence, they don't feel like accidents anymore. They feel like something else, something built to stay hidden. So, after hearing all the witness statements and rumors, the fires, the threats, the way Gary was hunted, after learning about all the shady people circling this case, and seeing how diligent Gary was with his treatment, I just can't believe he suddenly turned on his friends one random night. None of it fits. Not what the bee printed, not what some people claimed, and definitely not what the actual case files show. But the real reason I believe Gary Mathias wasn't the villain, that he wasn't just another missing person, but another victim, has nothing to do with theories. It's not opinion. It's right there in black and white. In 2019, while documentaries, podcasts, and headlines kept pointing fingers, something quiet slipped in the official case files. No press release, no article, no headline. Just a single-page memo buried in the paperwork. And it says, word for word, Gary Mathias is believed to be a victim of foul play. This case remains open as a missing person/homicide case. It is in the best interest of all involved that this letter not be forwarded to the Mathias family. This is not gossip. This is not speculation. That's a police document. You could see it in the case files for yourself. The Yuba County Sheriff's Office, the same agency that let Gary take the blame for decades, reclassified him as a homicide victim. And that raises questions that have gotten to me ever since. If they believed Gary was murdered, why keep it quiet? Why let the public keep blaming him while privately calling him a victim? And if they really thought someone else was responsible, why didn't they look harder at the ones who threatened him, the ones with records, with fire in their past, with every reason to want him gone? Because in the end, Gary Mathias wasn't just another name in a cold case. He was a son, a brother, a friend, a piece of something good, and after everything he fought to survive, he deserved better than silence.
The river knows where the willows lean, where the stones lie quiet, where the moss turns green. It hums a tune from an age gone by, soft as the clouds in a painted sky.